Hello everyone. So today's talk is about embracing open source for data collection. I am Ashish Ranjan, Senior Software Engineer at Sumo Logic. I am the part of data collection team since last 2 years, and data collection team is primarily responsible to collect data from customer environment. Talk we are primarily going to look around data collection for modern app ecosystem using Sumo Logic open source. After this talk, we will be much more cognizant about what are the open source Sumo Logic provide. We will also look at the various categorization of these open source, how they can be categorized into different bucket. At the end, we will look at the community aspect, with like how one can contribute back to these project. This is how our flow will look like. First we will look for the install collector, then we will look at the open source, and finally we look at the community aspect. So let's have a look at the install collector. I will start with some fact. Like, do you know Sumo install collector can be managed by UI? This basically means once Sumo agent is installed on host machine, it can be completely controlled by UI. This means one can create new sources, one can modify source, one can define new file path. In fact, one can delete its collector. Also, Sumo install collector can be auto upgradable just on a single click of button. This means just I click a upgrade button on UI, it will upgrade all my install collector on host machines. Also, Sumo agent is far more failure resilient and fault tolerant. This basically means Sumo agent has inbuilt capability of retry and backup. So, so if we look at Sumo, it may encounter some outage. Even during that time, install collector keep backing up all the data, and after some time, it will retry whenever Sumo come in sane state. So in short, install collector is Sumo Logic flagship agent which collect log and matrices from the host machine. So before going forward, let's have a look at the conversation between Bob and Tim. Bob is engineering manager and Tim is engineer. So Bob has recently learned about Sumo Logic, and he is able to successfully set up Sumo agent on his machine. So he is happy. So Bob to Tim. Hey Tim, you know what? Today I installed Sumo agent on my machine and it was very quick. Tim, cool Bob. Bob, Tim, I want to set up Sumo agent to collect my Kubernetes log and to collect my Azure log, and it will be great if you can also collect Okta events. Tim, I will try Bob. Bob, Tim, it's little bit urgent. Can you do in like 1 or 2 days? As you know, setting up Sumo agent is like couple of minute task. Tim, I will try Bob. So now Tim visit to collection management page where he looked at the install collector sources. He found there are some sources to collect collect log and some sources to collect matrices. He is also impressed with the fact that Sumo provide capability to collect log and metrics from Docker system. But he is confused how he is going to collect log from Kubernetes environment, how he is going to collect log from Azure and GCP, and forget about Okta. There is nothing mentioned in last slide. So at this time, Tim is little bit in stress, and he is stressed about how he is going to meet expectation of Bob, like collecting log from Kubernetes, Azure, and Okta. Unfortunately, Tim was not aware that Sumo provide 30 plus open source solution for data collection. Before going forward, let's have a look at the philosophy behind why we are embracing open source from the developer perspective. So if we do little bit backtrack, back to early days, they are used to have fewer machines, so there's fewer troubleshooting problem. Even a developer with decent grep and SSH skill can manage and debug their troubleshooting problem. However, if we look at the present scenario, systems are getting complex day by day. Systems are rapidly growing toward microservices and generating lot of log. So So if we look any service, it primarily consist of Kafka. It can have Kafka, Mongo, NoSQL, SQL, and many more. These primarily run on some VM container and could be run on Kubernetes cluster. So if we look, it's very difficult to build a generic collector which can collect log from all these services. So it's difficult to build. However, with the community effort, it can be easily achieved because there exists an army of like-minded people who are building collector to collect log from these services. So going forward, we are looking to embrace open source so that we don't want to reinvent wheel by ourselves. Rather, we want to move faster by embracing open source. So in this talk, it is very difficult to cover all the 30 plus open source in 20 minutes. So what I have done, I have categorized into 3 categories: appender, plugin, and integrations. We will look each of them and working of each of them. So this is how our progress so far. We have looked at the install collector, we have looked at the philosophy part of the open source, and now let's look at the appender part, how appender work. These questions will be answered in further slide. So what are appenders? Appenders are logger component to which logger delegate task of writing logs. So appender primary responsibility is to printing log at different destination like on console, on file, on socket, on HTTP. Typically, if we look at the current scenario, typically a service and app is built by using some kind of logger library, and logger library can have multiple appenders. Logger library not just give capability for the to attach multiple appender, but it also give configuration like one can control their log formatting, timestamp, log level. Typically, app and service write log to logger, logger route those log to appenders, and appenders finally write to different location. For example, console appender will forward log to console, and finally file appender will write to file. If we look at the Sumo appender directly push log to the Sumo logic environment by using HTTP endpoint. If we look, currently we provide open source solution for Java, .NET. For JavaScript, we are providing JS logger, and for Python, we are providing Python log handler and Prometheus scraper. Prometheus scraper is primarily used to collect matrices in Prometheus format. The another thing is if someone directly push log from his website or Node.js application, he can send using JS logger. The one benefit of using appender is it has inbuilt mechanism of retry, queue, batching, and compression. Also, once you have built application using appender, this makes sure that irrespective of environment it is deployed, your log will be always sent to the Sumo logic. You don't need to install Sumo agent on your system. We can see Tim is still following us. So far we have looked at the appender. Now come to the plugin part. So what are the plugins? So if we look at the modern collector, it is primarily based on pluggable architecture. So basically collector itself does not have much capability, but addition of each plugin enhance its capability. So if we look in this example, we have core collector. It can be Fluent D, Logstash, CollectD, or Telegraph. Primarily our plugins, primarily plugin can be categorized into four categories: input, output, aggregator, and processors. With the help of input plugin, we can collect log from various sources like HTTP server, log file. It can also collect metrics and read log from databases. With the help of the output plugin, it can directly reroute log to different destination, for example Hadoop system, or for alerting. In Hadoop system, it can be used for big data analytics. In very similar fashion, Sumo Logic also provide our open source output plugin for various popular collector, using which all the logs are routed to Sumo Logic environment. These are the primary collectors to which we provide some way or other way plugins. For Fluentd and Logstash, we have output plugin. Fluentd and Logstash are primarily known for log collection. We also have logging driver for Docker. For matrices, we provide output plugin for CollectD and Carbon2 plugin for Telegraph. These are the well-known collector for matrix environment. We also have cool plugin to collect log from Jenkins. So Tim is still following us. So far we have talked about appenders and plugins. Let's come to the integration part. So what does integration mean? Integration can have multiple definitions, but from Sumo perspective, we define integration like aggregating different platform and cloud vendor to the single ubiquitous environment where one can manage log and matrices. Primarily cloud vendor provides some kind of mechanism to collect log, be it by API or event. Based on that, we have divided our integration on two categories. One is event based and second is polling based. So cloud vendor like AWS and Azure, they trigger event for whenever a log is generated. Similarly, some platform provide API. By polling it, we can fetch log. So forward we can look at the working of each category of integration. So first one is event-based integration. So I have taken example of AWS. However, this is true for GCP. So on very left side, we can see there are some service running. The first one is AWS VPC, second is Fargate, and third is Amazon Aurora. That log can be directly pushed to CloudWatch. CloudWatch is is a service which is primarily used for the is centralized place to collect log. The help information template, we can create a stack using Lambda and SQS. So this is how log collection flow looks like. When this stack is a build, the AWS services push their log to CloudWatch. For that, CloudWatch trigger an event, and event basically invoke a Lambda function. Lambda function basically stream log and finally send into Sumo environment. For that, one need to create an HTTP source. In case of failure, the event is inserted into queue, and after some time, retry will trigger and it will re-ingest log corresponding to that event into Sumo logic environment. However, so far we have only looked at the event log aspect, but there are some services, instead of generating log, they generate event. For example, GuardDuty and Security Hub. They primarily generate event, and it can be easily collected using CloudWatch events. CloudWatch event finally trigger a Lambda function, and Lambda function stream that event and send into Sumo environment. So far we have looked at the AWS environment, but for Azure we provide template, and for GCP too. In Azure world we call it ARM, Azure Resource Manager, and for GCP it is CDN, Cloud Deployment Manager. These are the integration which we provide. AWS has lot many integration, whereas for Azure Azure we provide integration to collect log from blob storage and events from Azure Monitor. For GCP we are building new integrations. For now we have GCP Suite Alert. Now let's come to the polling based integration. This is one of the simplest integration we have. It primarily in polling based integration, primarily a script run on VM, container or serverless. These scripts basically poll APIs of the platform. These scripts also take care of last read information so that data duplication does not happen. So one need to provide access ID and key to collect log from APIs. So this is how VM interact with platform APIs. And once script fetch some data from a platform, it will push to Sumo environment. Primarily, we give these kind of integration based on the polling. So these are the polling based integration. We have integration with Netscope, Lightstep, Cloud Foundry, Heroku, MongoDB, and we also provide integration with Okta, Salesforce, and Box by using Sumo Janus library. Sumo Janus library is quite popular among our customers. So these are the few names. We have many more integration, but I have selected couple of them. So we can see Tim has already learned some integration and he is happy to work again. So far our progress, we have looked at the install collector, we have looked at the open source, and under open source we also looked at the appender plugin and integration. So we also looked how these open source can be categorized into, they fall under these three categories. Let's come to the community aspect. How can you contribute to Sumo open source repository? So it is it's very simple. Just create a pull request. Our development team time to time review it. Once it is approved, it will be merged into GitHub. If you want to altogether submit a new repository, basically a new folder, in that case you can submit into Sumo Logic content folder, and there our development team will review it and finally merge into GitHub. Does Sumo provides support for this solution? We provide support for it, but the recommended way is you need to create an issue on GitHub to ask question or to create a bug. So these are the three key takeaways. So far we have talked primarily about data collection for the modern app ecosystem using Sumo Logic open source. At this point we are much more cognizant about what are the open source provided by Sumo Logic. We have also looked at the various category of these open source, and we also looked at the working of how each category of open source work. At the end, we looked at the community aspect, how one can contribute back to these projects. And we can see Tim has already completed his job and he is enjoying his vacation. Thank you.